Hello and welcome to Pop Screen, part of the Geek Show podcast network. We are that corner of the Geek Show that likes to deal with the good, the bad and the bewildering of movies, either starring, about or by pop stars. No, the podcast covers a broad range of musical and cinematic genres, from country and western to hip-hop, from documentaries to science fiction. I'm your host, Graham Williamson. I'm a short filmmaker and a writer for the Geek Show, Byline Times, Horrified and We Are Cults. And I've been joined this week by...
Oh, you want me to say my name? Sorry. Right. I'm Ben. I'm just a guy. I do some reviews for the Geek Show. I'm on Twitter. Yeah, I don't really do much. An occasional podcast guest. There you go.
Yes. That's a nice career, isn't it? Occasional podcast guest.
I've thought about setting up my own, and then I get incredible imposter syndrome, and then So I record it, I edit it, and then I'm like, yeah, nobody's ever going to see it or hear this ever. It's kind of like, so maybe one day, but I'm like, does the internet need another middle-aged white guy's opinion on film? Probably not.
Yeah, that's true. I was the last one before the drawbridge closed. Yeah.
So I'm there on the other side of the moat going, let me in. There's crocodiles in here.
But we have come this week to talk about a thing that late last year, Rob, our Geek Show head honcho, put it out via our Twitter that we were looking for new Pop Screen episodes and we were looking for some new co-hosts. This is your first time on the show, isn't it? Yeah.
Yep.
And you suggested World Gone Wild, which was not a film I was familiar with at all.
I'm sorry. It was sort of like films with pop stars, and I was like, well, I really like this one. Now, you got to remember as well, my part of my name on Twitter is Trash King. Even though I kind of mainly review sort of like Japanese and East Asian cinema on the Geek Show, I do have this other love of trash cinema. Big believer in the films of Lloyd Kaufman have as much value as the films of Stanley Kubrick, for instance. It's sort of like in a different kind of way. I mean, I'm not comparing. Well, no, actually, I am comparing Toxic.
Yeah, you are directly
comparing the two, but they kind of serve different purposes. It's not a competition. It is they all.
Yeah.
If I've had a bad day, I'm not watching Full Metal Jacket. I'm watching The Toxic Avenger, or I'm watching Class of Nukem High, because they cheer me up. And so they serve a purpose within cinema. But I would quite happily then go and watch some Bong Joon-ho or Akira Kurosawa, whatever it may be, right afterwards. So, yeah, it's kind of where what that was. So, yeah, so this is
that's very
this is one of those
trash.
Yeah, this is one of those trash holes, like a trash hole. One of these. I was just falling into this hole of trash, and I tend to go through these different spurts and different areas. And I was and this came up as post-apocalyptic trash. And I was like, this sounds amazing. How have I not seen this before? And this is going back a few years. And as the minute Adamant turned up, I'm like, oh, okay, this is going to be interesting.
Well, that's the thing. I was going to say this is the first time we've dealt with Adamant on this podcast, but in fact it's not. I was reminded that he turns up very briefly in Derek Jarman's Jubilee, which we've done in the first year of the podcast. But it is the first one that feels like an Adamant movie in a way that film definitely does not. But this is... I don't know if you're a listener to Mark Kermode's show. Yeah. Do you remember when, I think it was when he was reviewing the Entourage movie, which he was very famously not a fan of?
Yeah.
And he said, The movie that they're making, the movie within the movie in Entourage that everyone's talking about as if it's going to be like a guaranteed smash. He said it looks like the sort of thing Adamant used to star in. And I remember thinking I am not familiar with the concept of an Adamant movie as like a subgenre, but he was probably thinking of something like this, right?
I'm guessing so. It's because this is quite unique, and it's definitely coming out of that narcotic haze of the 80s. Allegedly, of course. I have no proof of this, but it's definitely coming in. So, like, this was made with dreams, aspirations, and a ton of cocaine.
Yeah, definitely. It does have a sort of druggy element to it, albeit in a very different generation of drug culture because of Bruce Dern's character.
And this is it. The 80s still had this love letter to, because it was the boomers kind of coming into
Mm,
their own at this point.
yeah,
I mean, obviously, and there was still a love affair with the Vietnam War. There was still a love affair with those kind of the hippies and things like that, because that's what the youth culture was. So it is really strange. It's a bit like, you could argue that it's Gen X moving into millennials now.
yeah, definitely. I mean, I am fascinated with the way that nostalgia cycles
Mm,
traditionally move, and when you go back to, particularly in the mid 80s, particularly around the time this will have been conceived and written, you have, I think, two truisms about the 60s. The first is that any rock star who started out with the 60s produced some shocking music in the 80s.
yep.
Really awful. Even Bowie, who's, my personal number one, had a bad 80s.
There is a caveat to that one, and that being Alice Cooper, who arguably got better in the 80s after he came off the drugs and the drink.
What, did Cooper start out in the 60s? Because I always
He
thought of,
did.
oh, right,
1968,
okay.
the Alice Cooper band.
Ah,
His first album was, yeah, it's like 68. He was part of that Detroit thing with the MC5, in the Stooges, all that kind of thing. The Alice
right.
Cooper band was very much part of that. But no, it's a lot of his early stuff. I'm a big Alice Cooper fan, if you haven't guessed. Is Yeah, no, he did a lot of that early stuff was really, really good, and then it kind of went off kilter. The drugs kind of took over. Then he got clean, and it was just, he brought in every pop songwriter he could, and
Yeah.
hence why we had hits like Poison and things like that. So it's kind of, there is definitely a layer of dairy to it all after that, but it's just got that epic 80s sound that, it's when Dokken was doing Nightmare on Elm Street 3, and things like that. So it's like, yeah, love
Well,
it.
the other thing I was going to say about 60s artists in the 80s is that they produced generally terrible music, and they also generally had massive hits. I think Neil Young was the only person who went so wayward that his audience ran away, and that's Neil Young for you. Um, but yeah, there was, as you say, this first wave of boomer nostalgia, and so it's not
Mm,
surprising to see a movie set in the movie made in the late 80s that posits that what will save humanity after the apocalypse is basically hippies quoting from House of the Rising Sun.
basically, but not just any hippie, Bruce Dern.
The ultra hippie in many ways, yeah.
They only could have got any with one of the Fonda,
Oh,
not
Peter
Peter
Fonda,
Peter Fonda. There you go. I
yeah,
can't remember his name is. But yeah, they could have only gone there with Dennis Hopper or Peter Fonda. Dennis Hopper probably would have done this as well in the
yeah.
80s.
That's true, yeah. But Dennis Hopper again was completely cleaned up by this point in the 80s. So maybe I don't know what Bruce Dern's personal drug regimen was at any stage in his career, but this feels method acted, I would say.
Yeah, it's honestly that this he. I mean, I was going to kind of come onto it later, but Bruce Dern doesn't even remember making this film.
Right.
Reading up on it, he's sort of like, apparently he was asked about it at a con one time, or a Q&A, and he's like, yeah, there were certain things that we were doing in the 80s that I just don't remember. Do not remember at all.
I remember you saying that to me before I watched it, and my initial assumption was, ah, right, so it's going to be one of those things where you come in, you do a day's filming, you've done your cameo, and you never remember when the film's released. No, he's in basically every
No,
scene.
he is like one of the he is on the poster. He is one of the major characters of the film. It's like there's no dodging this one. He is going to be in it. But it's really strange, and I know we'll kind of get into the minutiae of it in a bit, but it's you can tell by the look of all the other actors' faces, they have no clue what he's going to say next.
Yeah.
He is on improv he's on his own planet. In fact, you know what? I think he's in a different film.
He feels like he's in something that's a bit more in line with, a boy and his dog or something like that, a more hip, cynical kind of take on the
Yeah.
apocalypse. Whereas this is the Reagan years, you can go to some nasty places. Hollywood films are still pretty tough in a lot of ways compared to the average blockbuster now, but there's also an assumption there'll be a muscly all-American hero who sorts everything out by the end.
So we get Michael Parra instead.
Indeed,
Yeah,
yes.
I love Michael. No, I'm not going to hear a bad word said against him.
I wasn't planning. He's not an actor, I must admit. I have strong opinions on, because this is what I'm kind of dancing around. I'm in enemy territory here. There are some people who love the 80s and you just want to live in the 80s all their life, and then there's me. I can't stand the whole decade.
Fair enough.
So yeah,
I feel hated on because that was my teen years right there. So it's kind
well,
of
it's one
like,
of those things that I have a pet theory that people love. People become obsessed with two eras. There's the era when you were a teenager because you were a teenager, and then there's the era directly before you were born, because that's kind of the lost continent.
yeah, what
That's
you
the
kind of,
one.
and certainly what you get influenced by your parents and things like that. Because I
Yes.
was a teen, sort of like late 80s, early 90s. So I was 16, like when the whole grunge thing kicked off.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my era. So I've got this real cynical kind of view to it. But when you went to the video store, it was all Rambo 3. It was all even the bad sequels. You didn't even get them the first time round, the good ones.
Yeah.
So it was like Jason Goes to Hell and all that kind of thing. So it was already kind of like, yeah, we've given up on these things. And then it was things like Videotape and Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction. And so, yeah, it was a really weird time because on the one hand, you had this really wonderful but cynical cinema. And
Mm.
you had also these throwaway. I mean, Ticks. Ticks is a great movie. I think 1993. That talk about a film that kind of missed its boat. A
Yeah.
creature feature with the guy who was in The Fresh Prince of Bel Air, and I've forgotten all the names, even the character names.
I've got to say, there is literally
Alfonso.
one person I know who was in the Fresh Prince of
Yeah,
Bel Air, and I don't
Carlton. He
think it
played
was him.
Carlton. There you go.
Right.
Him. He's in it, but he's
Right.
playing a bad guy, and it's sort of like no. No, no, no. And it's got Seth Green in it as well, and it is literally about ticks. And it's got Clint Howard in it as well. Not Clint Howard.
Of-
Oh, what's his name? Yeah, no, the brother of Ron Howard. Clint
yeah, I
Howard.
was going to say,
Yeah,
of
yeah.
course it's got Clint Howard in. How could it not?
And he's great, and that his is a cameo, but it's kind of got that 80s feel. Yes, it was it was released in 1993, but it felt like an 80s movie. And it's that whole bleed over between the two generations. Sorry, yeah, I've kind of sidetracked a little bit, but it is, yeah, that 80s thing. There is something about it, but also I have a big affinity to the 70s as well, because I was born in the 70s, grew
Mm.
up in it. I was there for the auteur kind of thing.
Yeah, the 70s are the one that I feel aggrieved to miss out on. That's where my theory comes from. I love the 90s, I love the 70s, the 80s
God
is
damn those 80s.
yeah, just
And they're synth pop.
maddeningly
Who do they
separating
think
the
they
two
are?
good ones. Yeah. But hey, you mentioned Carlton from The Fresh Prince of Bel Air being an unlikely choice of villain. How do you think Adamant racks up on the unlikely villainometer?
There was a thing that Roger Corman said years ago about one of his films where he said, never let the monster be shorter than your leading lady. And that is something that definitely Adamant suffers from in this film.
Yes, yeah, that's very true. I knew that this was going to be something when the opening credits, which are very good, by the way. I'm
Yeah,
a
yeah.
sucker for a really good opening credits sequence. But the opening credits end with, and Adam Ant as Derek.
Yeah, I mean, they've done him no favors there by giving him a villain name of Derek Abernathy. I mean,
No.
it's like he said. I mean, he sounds like a preacher man. Fair play. It's
Yeah.
like Derek Abernathy from the deep south, and he's there, and it fits in well with the character they're trying to portray. And it's the first time I've seen a villain arrive by helicopter quite like that.
Yes. Yeah.
It was kind of like, okay, that's an original. In the script, it said villain arrives by helicopter, and it was kind of like, okay, I like what you did there.
Yeah.
I like what you did there. But yeah, as a villain, it kind of gives the impression of Flash Gordon, 1980s Flash Gordon.
Mm.
You've got Crichton. Is it Crichton? The guy in the mask who gets thrown. Adamant kind of has that feel to
The
him. He's
Peter
not the head
Wingard.
honcho, but he's a bit
Yeah.
creeping. You always think there's somebody above him. So he's
Mm.
part of a chapter of this religious cult, whatever it is.
Mm.
But yeah, no, it's when he's not intimidating, and that's the problem.
Do you think it's just occurred to me because this is sort of Adam, well after Adam and the Ants broke up,
Yeah.
after really Adam Ant's solo career sort of fizzled out unjustly quickly, I would say. I really like Goody Two Shoes. I think it's a great song. But yeah.
Okay.
Um,
I had that on 7 inch, so I can't say anything.
no, it's good. I always love when it comes up in Hot Fuzz. I think that's a great needle
Yeah.
drop, and I love the song. But do you think that he was really going for a serious acting career here?
Ooh, he was definitely looking to change gears and certainly having that duality of pop singer and film actor. But then again, you get this a lot with those, especially going back into the 80s. I mean, Cher kind of went through it a lot more successfully, one might say.
Mm,
Um, but where they kind of went off, Lady Gaga's going through it right now, is where they're kind of exploring other creative ideas. So it could have been just kind of that avenue. He wasn't seeing necessarily that I now want to be an actor.
mm,
It's more he was being given roles. He was definitely searching for it. He was telling his agent to go out and do it. If somebody had then turned around and said, right, do you want to make an album? Here's £1 million. He'd be like, yeah, I'm going off to make an album now. So he was kind of following where the work was, so to speak.
yeah.
But serious acting, I think in his head he was. Um, talent wise,
Well, it's sort of it's not so much a talent wise thing, although yeah, I mean he isn't he's no Olivier, is he? Um, but what I was thinking was that a film that was perhaps more consciously tongue in cheek about having a pop star in the um, in the movie would find some way to work that into his villain persona. He's a cult leader. You know, every pop star is kind of a cult leader. Is there some way
absolutely.
we can play with that? Can we have him deliver a sermon? Can we have him sing even? But it feels like the film closes itself off to a lot of those possibilities. And I can't decide whether that's because Adamant didn't want people to be reminded that he was a pop star, or whether maybe the film just isn't alert enough to these possibilities. I don't know.
And I think it could be a bit of both, to be
Mm,
honest, because I think because there are definitely parts there where it was set up and he was ready. You could have put him singing a song, singing a sermon, and it would
mm,
have fit in quite perfectly, and he would have been highlighting actually he can perform. Whether
yeah,
you think he's a great singer or not is another matter. But he was in the right place to perform, and they hijacked that with an action beat or with an interruption from another member of the cast. So Yeah, so I think it could be a little bit of both there, but also as well, it's such an odd film as well because in essence it's it's not Seven Samurai, it's more like Five and a Half Samurai. They haven't got the budget for Seven Samurai or A Bug's Life, depending on which generation you come from. So it doesn't quite have the, because it knows it's setting itself on a classic template that's been done to death at this point.
Mm.
And so I don't think it had the awareness to do that. It was more like, right, here's a movie, let's get it filmed. We've got a 4 million budget, which even at that stage wasn't huge.
Mm.
I mean, it was still a big, but I mean, you say £4 million now, people go, "Oh, that's a low budget film," and it's like, Jesus, what
Yeah, I
kind of
wouldn't
world am
say
I
no
living?
to it. Yeah, I know what you
What
mean.
world am I living in? I can make you 6 features for that, and still have enough for dinner afterwards. And it's so it's kind of one of those films where it's very much let's get it in, let's get it made, let's get it out. And as you say, Adam and might have turned around. In fact, really strangely is I could have imagined Adam Ant in like the gunslinger's role or in
Mm.
the explosives role. I didn't see him as the main bad guy. I mean, don't get me wrong. Uh, Julius Carey, who did the explosive Nitro, I mean,
Mm.
I love him. Anyway, have you ever seen The Last Dragon?
I
The
never have. No.
Oh, mate, honestly, it was made by Barry Gordy of Motown fame, and it is wonderful. It's an homage to kung fu and I suppose black exploitation in a way, but
I
also
th-
like 80s pop, like because it's got what was her name? Prince's girlfriend, uh, is it Chastity?
oh,
Uh,
yeah.
uh,
I'm just distracted by thinking. I've never had a situation where I've had it
Vanity,
put.
Vanity, not Chastity. There we go. I knew
Vanity,
it was
yeah,
one of them.
definitely not chastity.
No,
Um,
definitely not Chastity. What am I thinking?
Uh, I'm just thinking it's never been the case where we've had someone on for their first co-hosting session and we have worked out what they're doing in the second one so quickly. Because if there is a kung fu movie made by Berry Gordy, of course we're doing that.
Oh, and you have to. It is a great movie, but you see, the guy who plays Nitro in World Gone Wild plays Show Nuff in The Last Dragon, and he is one of the iconic '80s villains of genre
Right.
cinema. So from Beeline Cinema, I mean, he's got the classic line "Kiss my Converse," and it's like "Kiss
Ha!
my Converse." He is chewing scenery from the beginning of that movie, but he's great, but he fits that bad guy, and I would have liked to have seen him as the villain in this film.
Mm.
All right, maybe I'm being influenced by The Last Dragon there, but Adam Ant, I can kind of see they kind of wanted, we want someone to get down with the kids by being boomer or older executives going, that Adam Ant, he's popular, isn't he? Let's get him in.
Yeah. And it's the classic thing that we've covered this happening 1,001 times on this podcast, where the life cycle of a pop star and the development process of an average film do not always match up perfectly. That by the time someone's big enough to, as you say, get on the radar of those older film executives, normally they've passed over into being considered indefensibly naff by actual kids.
Don't call Adam Ant naff.
Well, I
I've
was
never been the cool
defending
kid. What do
Two
I know?
Shoes, and
Actually, I say that. I think I was cool for about 10 minutes in 1992. Because I was the only one who had like Nirvana's first album or something like that. It was like one of those. But yeah, no. So you kind of get the impression with this is that they've approached Adamant and said, right, what part do you want to play?
Hmm.
And of course, Adamant being edgy and that was like, I want to be the villain. What's his name? Derek.
Well, that said, I still want to be the villain.
Well, we'll come to the name later. We'll do it. Oh, by the way, here's some drugs. Okay, thank you very much. Can we still call you Derek? Yeah, whatever. I don't care. This is all allegedly. There's no proof of any of this went on. I
It's
don't want to be sued.
we're talking about drugs as a sort of cultural influence on 80s Hollywood here, that
Yeah.
even if you were not partaking, there's just this massive cloud of cocaine that hovers like smog over the whole city, that was caused when I think David Crosby sneezed once. And yeah, you just can't escape it.
It's like the dirt bomb of cocaine went everywhere. It's like this big dirt bomb went off in Hollywood, and it was like, whoa, 80s, here we are.
Yes, absolutely. There is one thing about Derek that I find more fascinating than a man named Derek should be.
But surname Abernathy.
Abernathy is good. No complaints
Abernathy's a
about
good one.
Abernathy.
That sounds like a villain surname right there.
That's got a sort of like the baddie in a season arc of True Blood feel to it, I think. That's the kind of surname that is. Um, but there's the whole matter of what influenced him, because this is nothing if not a collection of post-apocalyptic tropes. So of course it does the last book surviving after the apocalypse, and
Yeah.
it turns out that Derek has got his ideas from a book about Charles Manson. That was not the original book, wasn't it?
No, I believe not. Oh, you've thrown that one at me now. I'm trying to remember what it, because I was only
Shall I,
rewatching it last night. Yeah, if you can pick that one up. Yeah, no, you kind of caught me out with that one.
In the original script, it was going to be Dianetics by L. Ron Hubbard.
That's right. Yes, I knew it was something to do with Scientology, and I was kind of like, what was it? Which one was it? And it was, yes, it was L. Ron Hubbard. They had a real big problem with it.
Yes.
As you would, to be fair. But yeah, Battlefield Earth is all I'll say on that.
Yeah, completely. It feels weird to remember those days when Scientology was just untouchable. Like, even on a very minor scale, there was an Alan Moore comic, part of the America's Best Comics line he did, which was about Jack Parsons, the occultist and rocket scientist, who was famously done very dirty by a young L. Ron Hubbard. And DC, who bought out America's Best Comics, just pulled that without question, because
Yeah.
you just could not at that point say anything bad about L. Ron Hubbard. But we can now, and I'm going to. He was a hilarious, fat-faced fraud who made up a religion and devoted most of his life to palling around on a big boat with a lot of young boys, pretending he was in the Navy, which I think is a bad look for a religion as homophobic as Scientology is.
I was going to say he sued nearly as many people as Harlan Ellison, didn't he? It's like, you stole the Terminator from me. No, we didn't. It was just you mentioned robot once in your story. That was it. It's not the same. It's not the same.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, no, it was. I do remember that now. As soon as you said it, I was kind of. It was eating away at me. But yeah. No. So, but the Charles Manson again, it kind of taps into that nostalgia I was talking about earlier of sort of like the boomers in their teens is like, oh yeah, no, he was the big bad, and he was seen as the big bad. I mean, that even resonates today. You watch something like Mindhunter and things like that. Charlie Manson was the name that hung over that show for the longest time. So it's still there as an influence. But yeah, it's.
It does lend it a certain symmetry, doesn't it? It's like the film starts to feel like it's absolving the hippies now, because Manson was somewhat unfairly, I think, blamed as the kind of the terrible end point of where hippiedom leads you. And now we're going to have this movie where Bruce Dern, who, as we've said, is the ultra hippie, kills the future Charles Manson, gets his own back on Manson.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So it kind of they right that wrong in history, very much the same way Inglorious Bastards does with Hitler.
Oh,
sorry,
Rambo
spoiler.
does.
Spoiler.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh, Rambo 2, where there is literally that line: "Do we get to win this time?" It's American
Yeah,
cinema of the '80s is about nothing if not refighting old battles.
oh, it was. It was like, can we revise history here?
Mm,
It's like we don't want this anymore. But no, as well, and especially the way Bruce Dern's character is seen as the Oracle. He is the all powerful, or he never gets phased by when Derek appears in his helicopter.
mm.
He's taking people out with hubcaps on a stick. It's kind of like he is the uber hippie, and even when they go to the city in search of the samurai, for want of a better phrase, he is all knowing. Was it? It was Catherine Mary Stewart.
Yes, Star of the
Yes,
Apple.
yes, and well, I see. I know her from Night of the Comet. You see, so
That's probably better, isn't it?
yeah. Night of the Comet.
I was going to say, I always have to issue a caveat when I mention the Apple, because one of my all-time favourite films is the achingly tender Iranian neo-realist drama The Apple by Samira Makhmalbaf. We're not talking about that The Apple here. We are not.
No, we're talking about Canon Films, The Apple here. We're
Yes.
talking about Golden Globus kind of going mental with their budgets. Hi, Slice Stallone, can you make an arm wrestling movie? Kind of The
Yes.
Apple. Yeah.
We are talking The Apple, which teaches us that it's a natural desire to meet an actual vampire.
Feel it every day myself.
Yes.
No, but I mean, probably most will probably remember her. Certainly of my generation and our generations, The Last Starfighter. She was kind of the love interest in that. She was also in Weekend at Bernie's. But yeah, no, she's one of those people. She was one of those faces of the 80s
Yeah.
easily, and she's in this, and she's doing her best. Bless her with what she's given. She's doing her best.
It's no kind of a role. I agree. I think she's charming enough in it, but this just isn't that
Between
kind of
Bruce
film.
Dern's ad-libbing, Michael Pari's stone face, and Adam Ant's shortness, it's just she didn't stand a chance. It's just sort of like, but hey, it was a payday.
Yeah, absolutely. No. Bruce Dern's ad-libbing, I I sort of wrote some of these down because some of this dialogue is astonishing. I'm fascinated by the scene where someone asks him whether he can do something, and he replies, "Does Pinocchio have a wooden dick?" And I don't know, Bruce.
I can't really say. I wasn't the one who went into the Disney store and looked down Pinocchio's shorts, so it wasn't something I did. I
Even
know
the
he had a
Del
long
Toro
nose.
version does not answer this question, which I thought was a terrible letdown after The Shape of Water.
Next time we see Guillermo del Toro, we'll ask him. By the way, when you were making Pinocchio, what was the appendages like? These are important questions. Bruce Dern wants to know. Not that he'll remember, but it's it's like the opening monologue as well. Even then, you kind of got the impression that he's got the words in front of him and he's kind of reading them, and he gets a bit bored about halfway through because
And it ends with him just going, "Ah, things are pretty fucked up."
yeah, it's like he's gone through. Well, 75 years ago, the world went, and you're getting all these details and facts, and all of a sudden, yeah, we're pretty fucked, and it's like, well, that turned quickly. So it's like, and it was that hippie round the fireplace, and it turned it that from being like a good example of that I always give is David Lynch's Dune. When you've got the narrator at the beginning giving all the details about what's going on, and it is quite dry the way it's
Mm,
delivered, and that was the way it was done. I say that's the one I always remember watching a lot as a kid, but I'm sure there's other better examples. And then this one, it was just kind of like, yeah, we're going to take that, and then we're going to turn right on it, and it's sort of like, where are we going now? I don't know what is happening here. It's like, is this serious? Is it a comedy? I don't know.
Yeah, the tone is very strange in it, and I think that opening monologue gave me a bit of sort of optimism that it was going to turn into a more sort of John Carpenter, George A. Romero kind of subversive B movie. That's the kind of touch they would have included, but it isn't really that, and it does have this very strange tone, I find, that
Mm.
there's a lot of broad laughs in it and a lot of sexual threat, which is an odd
Oh yeah,
mix.
oh yeah. A lot of it's a very rapey movie.
Mm.
It's can we use that as a descriptor? It's rapey.
I
So,
think as glib as it sounds, people are fine with that for some reason. I've always found it a bit
yeah.
weird, but yeah, Nancy Parsons is literally playing a character who is just called rape victim here.
That sounds about. So I'm laughing at it, and
Yeah,
it's
well,
no
yeah,
laughing
stick
matter.
that
But
on
you
your
know,
resume.
it's one of those things, isn't it? Maybe
Yeah.
I've become desensitized to it in Japanese cinema because it happens a lot in Japanese cinema, especially the 70s.
But it's one of those things where it, I don't have a red line, I don't have many red lines, I guess, but it all depends on where my expectations are set. I've recently been to see the new Brandon Cronenberg film. I liked it a lot. I found it very funny, but I think if I was watching some of those scenes just sort of jumping unbidden into the middle of a Nancy Myers movie, they'd be a bit disconcerting, really. I'd find
Yeah,
them a
yeah.
bit distasteful.
No, and I can get the purpose of it here is to show that lawlessness of the world that we are now entering into. Because this is quite early on as well. I mean, we get to know the village, the little town where they've got the water,
Mm.
but they're off the map. And then all of a sudden the bad guys turn up, and that's where it all. So it's kind of like the lawlessness of that. This could have very easily, much like any samurai movie or Chambara movie, it could have been a western quite easily. And I
Yes.
suppose it was. I mean, you got the Magnificent Seven,
Mm.
but this could have been an adaptation of that story done on a budget for a western, and so you can see why people like Bruce Dern were brought into it, and they probably were sold on it like that. So, like,
Yeah.
right, is this film? It says it's post-apocalyptic, but consider it like a western.
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
Thank you very much. I'll have a bit of that for me, please. So, yeah, it's definitely an odd tone because it doesn't quite know what it's going for.
Mm.
And that's what makes it even more surprising when you learn who the director was, Lee Katzin, who directed.
He, di- he,
Actually,
di- he directed at least one episode of every single American television show of the 60s and 70s, didn't he?
but he was also a big Steve McQueen guy because he directed
Right.
Le Mans as well.
Yeah.
And hence why the picture of Steve McQueen halfway through this movie is this your husband? No, it's Steve McQueen. I mean, sorry, you can't be asking people that kind of thing. Ugh.
Yes. Yeah. I think the Western
Hmm.
allusion you make is a good one. I think the one thing that I missed, the one lesson that I, as a big Western fan, wished that they'd kept is that, unlike a classic Western, it never seems to take very long to get anywhere in this film. You've got this supposedly ruined post-apocalyptic society, and everywhere seems to be quite a short hop from each other. It's not a post-apocalyptic film like, say, to take an example that I'm sure was on Katzin's mind, the Mad Max
Hmm.
films,
Yeah.
where you often get a sense that Max is having to travel astonishing distances to find even the slightest hint of civilization. But here they just sort of hop from town to town, really.
Yes. No, absolutely. That everything's just a couple of miles away.
Mm,
That even though they're kind of cut off from everybody, they're not really. It's just kind of around
yeah.
the corner. It's sort of like, oh, you see that mountain over there, just on the other side of that. It's fine, but they won't find us here because we're on the other side of that mountain. And it's like, no, no, no. But yeah, nothing ever takes on. And the way they differentiate, oh, it took a long time because look, now it's dark. It's like
Yes,
that's like half a day. It was blatantly the mid afternoon before you left. It was kind of one
completely.
of those. It was one of those. But yeah, and petrol never seems to be a problem either.
No, that's very true. Yeah, I suppose that's one of the things about 80s post-apocalyptic movies that you always have to take with a pinch of salt. It's like it doesn't really seem to hurt petrol consumption, the nuclear destruction of the world. It seems
You
to
can take my food, you can take my water, but do not take my motor vehicle.
yes.
Yeah, Americans and their cars.
And that's kind of lovely because there aren't many post-apocalyptic films that you would call realistic, and the ones that are massively depressing. No one is going into this film expecting something like Peter Watkins' The War Game or
Mm.
Cormac McCarthy's The Road. It's nice that it has these little bits of shorthand in where it's like, I can imagine, the people of a future Earth being oppressed by roving Mansonoid cults, but let them have cars, for God's sake.
Let them have some pleasure, and let the cult followers wear white in a desert scenario and never have a spot of dirt on them until they get shot, of course. But but honestly, it was an advert for Das Automatic, petrol consumption. Um, it was, and as I say, none of them looked like they were going hungry either. Let's put
Hmm.
it there. There was quite a few people on there who definitely weren't going hungry.
Well, I guess it's like, since it is kind of a Western, they're all just sharing beans,
Yeah.
albeit a good bean-based diet.
Oh, and now we're on to Blazing Saddles. And let's not go there.
I
Yeah.
also think one of the fun fantasies of these kind of movies is which becomes, the whole text in something like Ready Player One, is
Mm.
the fantasy that your fairly basic cultural knowledge is going to be the key to restoring humanity. Like, there's a great example of this later on where I think it is Michael Parry, isn't it, who's dancing with the female lead, and he goes, "In the old days, they used to call this dancing." Well, yeah, after a fashion, yeah, I guess.
You might call it dancing. Mm. The judges on Strictly are like, no,
Yes.
Michael, no.
No.
There's no Tina Sparkle. Tina Sparkle. Oh, I love Strictly Ballroom. There you go. There's an insight. There's a scoop for you. Trash King loves Strictly Ballroom. Yeah, but it's odd what people know and what people don't know as
Yeah.
well. Because as you say, like Steve McQueen, if you're going to know pop culture, he would have been kind of like one of the. But then again, I don't suppose there would have been many copies of Bullet hanging around. Um,
Probably a few copies of Le Man. I think the director would have made sure that that one survived.
yeah. Oh, oh look, there's a copy of Savages from 1974. Did you not see that? Oh,
Oh,
that's a good film.
we
So,
don't have the Dirty Dozen, but weirdly we do have the two
the sequel.
sequels.
Oh, did I direct them? Oh, sorry, I remember now. Yeah. There you go. There's another thing about Dirty Dozen. I actually saw the sequels before I saw the original. My
Oh,
stepdad was a
right.
massive, loved those kind of films and things like that. So
Mm.
I got, so in the video boom, it's kind of like, right, I want to watch the Dirty Dozen. He's like, this isn't the Dirty Dozen. But this is also the man that got me into Kung Fu movies by getting me a Bruce exploitation film, not realizing that Bruce Lee and Bruce Lee were two different people.
Ah, yes. Yeah.
It's kind of like, you know what? I'm not. He was the kind of person when they had. Remember when Pacific Rim came out, and you kind of went and they had this sci-fi original Atlantic Rim. He would have been
Yes.
the person fooled by it. You know, it's kind of like one of those. Oh, this is only just out in the cinema. Yeah, that's who they were aiming at.
He's the person who Asylum Pictures dream of like having as their customer.
Yeah, and then you get people like me who just love them anyway. So
Yeah,
it's kind
yeah.
of like, Charlie, then go on then.
It's funny though, isn't it? There is a time when you don't care about that. Like, I remember looking back at as a kid, I just accepted that there were two cartoons called Ghostbusters and one of them had a gorilla in for some reason. And that's just how it is. I
That was just
Yeah.
yeah. It's like, or groups would have, pop artists would have 3 versions of the same song in the charts at the same time, and it was just like, yeah, just pick which one you liked.
Well, Adaman sort of went through a sort of strange version of that himself, because the first version of Adam and the Ants, all of the musicians left to form Bow Wow Wow.
Yes.
So that was kind of his version of that, wasn't it? The Bow
Yeah.
Wow Wow were kind of like the real Ghostbusters equivalent of Adam and the Ants.
Looking over at their big screen adaptation, which is the
Yeah.
King of the Wild Frontier, it's like, I bet wow, were great,
Oh
they
yeah,
were
I do
really
like
good.
Bow Wow Wow.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So there was another comparison I had, and it's just flipped out my head. Put a pin in that one. I'll come back to it later.
Gotcha.
Guaranteed. Halfway through saying something else, I'll remember. I was like, oh no, that's pertinent, but no, it's gone. It's gone.
But yeah, to fish back actually a bit, you did mention David Lynch's Dune,
Yes.
and the ending is extremely similar to that film, I think.
Mm,
I
yeah,
guess
I
maybe
can
I'm
see
seeing
it.
it more because I know it's the divisive bit of Dune that he added to Frank Herbert's novel with the rain
Yeah.
suddenly breaking.
Yeah, no, and I can see, and that is pretty much. I mean, there was a whole bunch of those films as well. That there was, what's it called, The Eliminators 3000, an Italian post-apocalyptic movie, which, spoiler, does exactly the same thing. But that was very much a trope. If you
Right.
didn't have rain throughout the film, and the whole purpose was water, it was going to rain at the end.
Gotcha. Yeah.
That was just a trope. That was just kind of like something came through. But yeah, no, very much sort of like the seas of Arrakis will now be flooded. It peed a lot of people off.
It
Definitely, I
did.
remember that. I remember.
Yeah.
And then again, we're talking about a film there where they had a kids' toy line. I remember a friend of mine having Sting's character and Baron Harkonnen as toys in primary school, and it was like, looking back on it, I mean, at the time it was like, oh, these are cool. Hey, look, he's got a knife. But looking back on it and knowing those characters as well as I do now, it's like, didn't really think about that one, did you?
Obviously, I believe that every David Lynch movie should have a tie-in kids toy range, and I think the face swapping Laura
Blue
Dern
Velvet.
figure from Inland Empire is
The Blue Velvet. You got Frank with additional masks. The mask playset for kids. Let me smell it. I can just imagine buying my son this. So like, here, son, go on, be frank. Actually, there was a photo of my son as a kid. He got this is the beginning of the pandemic, and I managed to get some masks for like painting and things like that. And he put one on his face like that, and I think I posted it on Twitter or something. Just go, oh my god, my son is watching, is channeling his
in a
Blue
Frank
Velvet.
booth. Yeah.
A kid's play set of oh, I love that. By the gang.
I mean, it's only a hair away from some of the toys that were released back
Yeah.
then. I've noticed that in recent years, one of those big kind of Gen X / elder millennial nostalgia touchstones has been looking back and thinking, isn't it a bit fucked up that there was a kids' toy range based on the Terminator? Isn't that a bit weird?
But then again, it's no worse than today. I mean, going into Smith's Toys the other day with my son after his swimming lesson, and they had Predator toys on the shelves, and they had
Yeah.
aliens, and it's just kind of like, and he just kind of, he's like, Dad, is that a Predator? And I was like, yes, and it is. Please don't tell the teachers. But to him, it's just like an alien creature. I mean, obviously, he's never seen the films, even though I maybe have seen them by. No. But yeah, it's so. As I say, I don't think it's just weird nowadays as compared to them, where everything was seen after Star Wars, and Star Wars was the one that caught everybody by surprise,
Mm.
that nobody knew. It was sort of like, there's a sci-fi film coming out. Shall we make toys? Yes. I mean, they made some. Have you ever seen Megaforce with? Oh, now I'm going to have to think. It was a joint production of Golden Harvest in Hong Kong and it's amazing 1982 film starring Barry Bostwick,
Yes.
Michael Beck. It's the one with the flying motorbike. I absolutely love it. It's absolutely. It's a film that it doesn't really have but you get to the end and go, well, what was the point of that? What was the story there? I don't know. I have no clue what was going on. Why were they fighting?
Yes.
Because they can.
But it's directed by Hal Needham, who is like, if you want loads of vehicular stunts in your movie, he was the guy to get.
Yeah, Cannonball Run, Smokey the Bandit, all those films, wasn't he?
Exactly.
Kind of yeah. Yeah, no, so it was, and it was very much that, but they made a toy line for it, and the film bombed something chronic. And so now if you go searching for Megaforce toys, you get Power Rangers. Power Rangers Megaforce. It's like,
I had a similar feeling recently when I say recently, about sort of 6 years ago, when I walked into HMV and there was just a wall of unsold Funko Pops for the movie Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets. It was like a mausoleum.
Edge your bets. Yeah, no, well, Funko are in all sorts of problems at the moment, aren't they?
They had to go all Atari's ET, didn't they? On
they did.
some of their lines.
Yeah. It was cheaper to bury them than to sell them.
I don't find Funko Pops as annoying as some people I know do, but I do find it a bit fishy the way that they're always used to kind of launder the idea of blockbusters as being cult movies, that before they come out there's the whole range of all the characters. It's like, look, you can see your favourite character from this upcoming film, and it's like, well, sometimes that works, and sometimes you end up with a wall full of the John Goodman voiced alien from Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets.
See, by that now, probably be a collector's item in 20 years, which is what people said about Jar Jar Binks. And I know, I was working in the industry at that point, and it was kind of like, no, nobody's going to like this character 20, 30, 50 years from now. I mean, please correct me if I'm wrong. You know, I don't know what kids want like that anymore.
I do not think Jar Jar has had the reassessment that nobody was predicting for him.
Yeah, George Lucas is incredibly racist. Who knew?
But yeah, I think that the fact that we are now talking about Funko Pops is maybe proof that we have exhausted World Gone Wild as a topic of conversation.
There is one other thing, and round, because I know you mentioned the budget earlier. This only made $328,000 on a $4 million budget. With that cast, you would have thought a couple of more people would have turned up. But no, it was a massive flop, and hence why probably don't see it anywhere anymore. I know MGM have the right made it. No, it was Apollo Films, wasn't it? And then it was distributed by MGM, which is now owned by Amazon. So I still hope that one day it kind of turns up and I can replace my German imported DVD. Yes, I own this film. But yeah, no, it is. It's what I call it a 5-star trashic. It is a trashic of the true term. It's a complete car crash of a movie, and it is wonderful, and I love it. But I couldn't recommend it to anybody. It's one of the. I love it. I'll watch it. It's fine for me. It's a bit like what was it Roger Foreman, former head of the BBFC, said about Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's like, oh, it's fine for us intellectuals, but can you imagine a factory worker from Leeds watching this?
Yes, yeah. I cannot imagine a factory worker from Leeds watching World Gone Wild. As you said, it's the sort of film that you can't recommend to anyone unless someone you know is an
Mm.
idiot who is making a podcast about pop stars trying to act, in which case, thank you very much for tipping me off.
No, and I apologise for making you watch it. But it's wonderful. It's 5 stars. Don't listen to anything I'm saying right now. But it isn't. But it is. But it is.
Well, if you enjoyed that, we're reviewing some more absolute rubbish on our Patreon very soon. Uh, Mark Cunliffe, as revenge for me making him watch You and I, the Tattoo movie, has challenged me to watch The Governors, a British football hooligan movie starring a bloke from Rizzle Kicks.
Mhm.
That will be released at the start of next month, as well as the usual 2 free episodes. If you subscribe to our Patreon, you'll also get our other hugely enjoyable movie and TV miscellany podcast last night, which we've both been on now, haven't we?
Yes, we have.
Yeah,
We're not together.
not
Although I think
together.
we've got a director's uncut coming up. I think is it you doing it, Shinya Tsukamoto?
Oh, we are. Yes, we are both on that one. Yeah. I think
16th, I think.
that should be out. Yeah, a couple of maybe a couple of weeks after this comes out. But yes, our paths occasionally cross. I think we were both on one of the Kitano
Yes,
episodes,
we were
weren't we?
the
Yeah,
Kikujiro
Kikujiro and
and Hanabi
Hanabi. Yeah,
fireworks.
that was it. Yeah. So yeah, always fun to catch up with you again, Ben. And like I say, we will be back together on the Tsukamoto episode of Directors Uncut very
Yeah,
soon. You
no,
can follow the Geek Show on social media, on what's left of Twitter at this point, who knows, as well as Instagram and Facebook. But until next time, that's been your lot from Pop Screen. I've been Graham.
I'm Ben, and it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
No problem. Just got that under the wire before your cat starts pestering you there, I think.